Paul says in verse 6, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped. Christ, as Paul says, was in the form of God. And in the next verse, he's going to say that he was born in the likeness of man. This means that Jesus was pre-existent, meaning that before creation, before God put time into place and he began to build the foundations of the world, Jesus was pre-existing in perfect unity with the Trinity. The word form here means, when it says Jesus is in the form of God, it means that Jesus is the true and exact nature of God, being fully divine, having all of the characteristics and attributes and qualities of God. By Paul saying that he was in the form of God, he's essentially saying, in this context, in this passage, that Jesus has equality with God. The Son of God is and always will be God. Some people argue that Jesus was not fully God, and they'll say things in their arguments like Jesus never said, hey guys, I am God. It's kind of a nonsensical argument when you think about it. For example, I don't have to tell my kids that I am the best dad ever. They just know it, right? It's through my statements, through my actions, the way I play with them. Plus, it's even the Wi-Fi hotspot on my phone. So if they want to get on the internet, they have to type in the password, Dad is the best. There is plenty of biblical data and biblical evidence that Jesus is fully God. He's fully divine. And we know this from his direct statements. How his audience, the Pharisees, his disciples, reacted to those statements and his actions and his miraculous works that he accomplished. We also have those direct statements of the apostles themselves. Plus, as we begin to dive into this, I think you're just going to just see it because it's overwhelming. It hits you in the face. Let me just give you a handful of verses that prove Jesus' divinity. And please soak these in. John chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Bible teaches that Christ created everything. John chapter 1, verse 3, all things were created through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. Creation was a Trinitarian act that Jesus was involved in. Jesus is also a creator, just like God. John chapter 10, verse 30, Jesus declares, I and the Father are one. Similar to this verse, which doesn't mean that they are the same person, but what it means is that they share the same essence and are equal. In John chapter 8, verse 56, Jesus, he famously tells the Jews, your father Abraham rejoiced that he would see my day, and he saw it and was glad. Of course, those Jews, they're taken aback by this because Jesus was only in his early 30s, and they're wondering how could Abraham know about Jesus? And then Jesus says in John chapter 8, verse 58, truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am. Jesus infers and states that he was pre-existent. Only God is pre-existent. But not only that, though, he uses God's personal title from Exodus chapter 3, verse 14, with the burning bush incident when Moses asked God for his title and his name, and Jesus assumes the great title, I am. Now, modern interpreters, they're somehow confused if Jesus is claiming his full divinity, but if you're reading that passage, it's very clear that Jesus' audience, when he was saying those things, they were very clear on what Jesus was saying because they immediately pick up stones and they try to stone him because they understand exactly what Jesus is claiming and that he is divine and that he's fully God, and to them, that was blasphemous. After the resurrection, Thomas calls Jesus in John chapter 20, verse 28, my Lord and my God. Flat and easy. In the Gospels, the disciples, they overtly worship Jesus. For example, Matthew 14, when Jesus calmed the storm, they worshiped Jesus. And remember, these are all Jewish men who, according to the Old Testament, according to the Decalogue, the Ten Commandments, according to the first commandment, they're only allowed to worship God. After the resurrection in Matthew 28, when he appears to the disciples, they fall at his feet and they worship him. Matthew 16:27, Jesus calls the angels his angels. Jesus even has all the same attributes and characteristics of God throughout the Gospels. Earlier we mentioned that Jesus is the creator, but he's also sovereign over the weather. He's sovereign over the human body and over disease and sickness, over the demons. Oh, and he can forgive sins, which only God can do. Jesus is also, he says, he's everywhere. He's omnipresent. Matthew 18:20, where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am among them. Jesus is all powerful. He's been given all authority like God. Matthew 28:18, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Jesus, this is my last one, he's immutable. He doesn't change like God. Hebrews 13:8, Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Jesus is fully God. So why is Jesus' divinity important? Why is it crucial to the gospel? You have to ask yourself this. Why is it so important? The provision of salvation only works if Jesus is fully God. Jesus' sacrifice on the cross for our sins is sufficient because he was God. Jesus' death is sufficient because he was not just a finite human like us, but he is God. The divinity of Jesus also means that God, and listen very closely here, God reunited and reconciled us to himself through himself. In other words, God crossed the chasm created by our sin, and he reconciled us to himself. This means that God did the work himself. The fact that Jesus is also fully God, it means that our worship of Christ in our singing, in our songs, and in our life, it is good, it is correct, and it is right, since he's fully God. He's deserving of all of our praise and our worship and our adoration and our obedience and us following him in our lives. Jesus' divinity also means that we can pray to Christ, since he can hear our prayers since he is fully God.